They say trauma has a smell. For some people, it's the acrid scent of burning rubber or the metallic tang of blood. For me, the smell of absolute, life-altering devastation will forever be the cloying, suffocating fragrance of white hydrangeas mixed with expensive French champagne and the distinct, crisp scent of fresh-cut, manicured grass. Even now, 3 years later, if I walk past a florist shop and catch a whiff of those flowers, my stomach tightens, my palms sweat, and I am instantly transported back to that perfectly landscaped garden in Connecticut, where my life was meticulously dismantled for sport. It was a Sunday in late June, the kind of day that looks like a postcard for the American dream. Blue skies, mild humidity, birds singing as if they were on a payroll. But underneath that veneer of suburban perfection, a bomb was ticking. A bomb constructed of malice, jealousy, and a desperate need for control. And the person holding the detonator was wearing vintage Chanel and smiling at me with the predatory gaze of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. That shark was my mother-in-law, Evelyn Harrington. And the target wasn't just me, it was the unborn child I was carrying, the child she claimed to be celebrating. Before we continue, show some love by subscribing and drop a comment with your city and current time. I check every single one. Thank you for being here. To understand why that afternoon unfolded with such operatic cruelty, you have to understand the 3 years of silence that preceded it. Silence is a dangerous thing in a marriage. It festers. It allows resentment to grow like black mold behind the walls of a house that looks pristine from the street. Mark and I were experts at silence. We were the golden couple. He was the heir to a mid-sized shipping fortune, handsome in that soft, unthreatening way that mothers love. I was the scholarship girl, the graphic designer with the sharp wit and the underscore quote underscore zero underscore, as Evelyn used to say when she was feeling charitable. But our marriage was built on a fault line of secrets, the biggest of which was the reason we didn't have children immediately. Evelyn was obsessed with lineage. In her world, legacy wasn't just about money. It was about blood, the Harrington blood. She spoke of it as if it were a rare vintage wine that couldn't be diluted. From the moment the engagement ring, a sapphire that had belonged to Mark's great-grandmother, slid onto my finger, the countdown began. Quote 1 became her greeting, her goodbye, and the subtext of every conversation in between. At first, it was annoying. Then, as the months turned into a year, it became painful. Because what Evelyn didn't know, what Mark begged me not to tell her, was that the problem wasn't me, it was him. We found out 18 months into the marriage. We had been trying casually, then frantically. Ovulation kits, temperature charting, timing intimacy like a military operation. When nothing happened, we went to Dr. Arthur Henderson. Arthur was more than a doctor. He was a fixture in the Harrington social orbit, a man who played golf with Mark's father and attended every holiday gala. He was the keeper of the community's biological secrets. I remember the day we sat in his mahogany-paneled office. The air conditioning was humming, and Mark was gripping the armrests of his leather chair so hard his knuckles were white. Arthur didn't sugarcoat it. He couldn't. The test results were definitive. Mark had suffered from a complication of mumps in his late 20s that had gone untreated. The resulting orchitis had caused severe, irreversible damage. Azoospermia, 0 sperm count. Mark was sterile. I remember the silence that followed that diagnosis. It was heavy, suffocating. Mark looked like a man who had been hollowed out. In his world, masculinity was tied to virility, to the ability to pass on the name. To be sterile was, in his eyes, to be defective. And worse, he knew exactly how his mother would react. Evelyn wouldn't offer sympathy. She would see it as a failure, a weakness. Or, God forbid, she would somehow twist it to be my fault. "Please, Elena," Mark had whispered to me in the car afterward, tears streaming down his face. "She can't know. Not yet. It would kill her. Or she'd kill me. Let's just say we're working on it. Let's say it's unexplained infertility. Let the doctors handle it quietly." I agreed. That was my first mistake. I agreed to carry the burden of his secret because I loved him, and I thought that's what wives did. We protected our husbands. So for the next year, I became the designated problem. I sat through Sunday dinners while Evelyn made pointed comments about my diet, my stress levels, my __4_. I took the pitying looks from her friends. I let them believe I was the broken vessel, while Mark sat silently beside me, playing the supportive, patient husband. It was a performance, and it was exhausting. When we finally decided to use a sperm donor, it wasn't a decision made lightly. It was months of therapy, late-night conversations, and grieving the biological child Mark would never have. We chose a donor from a highly reputable bank, a profile that matched Mark's physical characteristics almost perfectly. Blue eyes, tall, athletic build, high aptitude for mathematics. We wanted the child to fit in. We wanted to protect the child from questions. We went back to Dr. Henderson, who facilitated the entire process with discretion and grace. He knew the stakes. He knew about Evelyn. He guided us through the IUI process, and when that second pink line finally appeared on the test, Mark and I wept, not just with joy, but with relief. We had done it. We had secured the family future. But secrets have a way of rotting the container they're kept in. When we announced the pregnancy at Christmas, Evelyn's reaction wasn't pure joy. It was calculation. I saw her eyes narrow as she looked at my stomach. "Quote 5, she had said, clinking her glass against Mark's. "The Harrington line continues. It took you long enough, Elena." She hugged me, but her body was stiff. There was a suspicion there, a nagging doubt. Perhaps she sensed Mark's hesitation, his slight disconnect. Or perhaps she just couldn't believe that I, the outsider, had finally succeeded. The months leading up to the baby shower were a blur of aggressive micromanagement. Evelyn insisted on hosting. She insisted on the venue, her estate. She insisted on the guest list, which ballooned from 50 close friends to 200 of the East Coast elite. It wasn't a party for me. It was a coronation for her grandchild. But beneath the party planning, something darker was brewing. Items started disappearing from our bathroom. My hairbrush went missing. A used toothbrush vanished. I found my prenatal vitamin bottles rearranged. At the time, I blamed Quote 7, or the cleaning lady. I didn't realize that I was being harvested. Evelyn was on a hunt. She had convinced herself that since Mark hadn't been able to conceive for years, this sudden success was suspicious. She didn't suspect sterility. Her arrogance wouldn't allow her to believe her son was flawed. No, she suspected infidelity. She had decided that I, the gold-digging outsider, had panicked about my position in the family and had slept with someone else to secure a pregnancy. The day of the shower arrived. I was 7 months pregnant, swollen, tired, and anxious. Mark was jittery. He had been drinking more lately, Quote 8, he said. He knew his mother was up to something. She had been making cryptic comments to him for weeks about Quote 9, but he was too cowardly to confront her. He just wanted to get through the day. We pulled up to the estate, and it looked like something out of a bridal magazine. Tables draped in white linen, crystal centerpieces, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. It was excessive. It was intimidating. It was Evelyn. __10_, Mark muttered as we walked toward the entrance. Quote 11, Quote 12, I whispered, clutching his arm. Quote 13, Quote 14. Relax. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one carrying the evidence of our deception in his womb. We were greeted by a wall of perfume and judgment. Evelyn's friends, women with faces pulled tight by surgery and diamonds heavy enough to sink a small boat, circled me like vultures. They touched my belly without asking. They made comments about my weight gain. Quote 15-1 said ominously. Quote 16. I smiled until my jaw ached. I drank sparkling water and ate tiny cucumber sandwiches and tried to ignore the way Evelyn was watching me from across the lawn. She wasn't mingling. She was standing by the microphone stand near the main archway, clutching a manila envelope. Her eyes were bright, feverish. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield moments before ordering the charge. Dr. Henderson was there, too. I remember the wave of relief I felt when I saw him. He was standing near the bar, looking out of place in his tweed jacket, nursing an iced tea. He gave me a small, reassuring nod. Arthur was the only person in that crowd who knew the whole truth. He knew the biology, the struggle, the love that had gone into creating this baby. His presence felt like a safety net. I didn't know then that he would be the only thing standing between me and total annihilation. The afternoon dragged on. We played the humiliating games. We opened the gifts, silver rattles, cashmere blankets, bonds in the baby's name. Mark stood by my side, playing the part of the doting father, but his hand was clammy. He kept checking his watch. Then the music stopped. The string quartet lowered their instruments. A hush fell over the crowd. Evelyn tapped the microphone. "If I could have everyone's attention," she cooed, her voice amplified across the lawn. "Please, gather round. I have a few words I'd like to say about family." The guests shuffled forward, forming a semicircle. Mark and I were ushered to the front, like sacrifices being led to the altar. Evelyn beamed down at us from the small raised platform. "Family," Evelyn began, "is the most important thing we have. It is our past, and it is our future. When Mark married Elena, we welcomed her. We hoped she would understand what it means to be a Harrington. We hoped she would respect the integrity of this family." She paused. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "But integrity is built on truth," she continued, her voice hardening. "And sometimes, to protect the family, we have to expose the lies that threaten to rot it from the inside." Mark stiffened beside me. "Mom, what are you doing?" he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. Evelyn ignored him. She held up the manila envelope. "I have struggled with this for weeks. I didn't want to believe it, but a mother knows. A mother always knows when her son is being deceived." She ripped the envelope open with a violent tear. "I hired a private investigator," she announced to the 200 guests. "I had DNA samples tested, from Elena, from Mark, and from the fetal cells we managed to isolate." My heart stopped. Fetal cells? How? Then it hit me. She hadn't gotten fetal cells. She was bluffing about the source. Or she had used some junk science kit she bought online. Or she was misinterpreting something. But it didn't matter. The accusation was the weapon. "The results are here," she shouted, waving the paper. "This child, this heir, has 0% genetic markers linking him to Mark. 0. He is not a Harrington. He is a bastard, a product of Elena's infidelity." The crowd gasped. It was a sound I will never forget. A collective intake of breath fueled by shock and scandal. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the patio stones. "Elena has been sleeping around," Evelyn hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She couldn't get pregnant by my son, so she went out and found a stud. Maybe an old boyfriend? Maybe the trainer at the gym? Who is he, Elena? Tell us. Who is the father of this baby you're trying to pass off as my grandson?" I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Mark. This was it. This was the moment. All he had to do was step forward. All he had to do was say, "Stop. We used a donor. I am sterile." It would be embarrassing, yes, but it would save me. It would save our marriage. "Mark," I choked out, "tell her." Mark looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. Then he looked at his mother, who was practically vibrating with righteous fury. He looked at the crowd of people staring at him, waiting for his reaction. And he crumbled. He looked down at his shoes and said nothing. He let the accusation hang in the air. He let everyone believe I was a whore, rather than admit he couldn't produce sperm. The betrayal was physical. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging. Evelyn screamed, sensing victory. Quote 35. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but my voice failed me. What could I say? If I screamed, quote 36, it would look like a desperate lie without Mark's confirmation. I was trapped. I was drowning in a sea of pastel linen and hatred. Actually, a voice cut through the chaos, that won't be necessary. It was a calm voice, steady, devoid of emotion, but heavy with authority. Dr. Henderson stepped out from the crowd. He walked slowly toward the platform, his movements deliberate. He didn't look at the guests. He looked straight at Evelyn. Evelyn stammered, caught off guard. Arthur said. He reached the platform and stood beside me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a protective, fatherly gesture that made my knees weak with relief. He reached out and plucked the paper from Evelyn's hand. He glanced at it, shook his head, and dropped it on the floor. "This is garbage," he stated. "I don't know what internet lab you sent your stolen hair samples to, Evelyn, but you wasted your money." "It's proof," Evelyn shrieked. "The DNA doesn't match Mark." "Of course it doesn't match Mark," Arthur said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the garden. "Mark is sterile." The silence that followed was absolute. It was deeper and more profound than the silence after the accusation. It was the silence of a worldview shattering. "Mark has been clinically sterile for 5 years," Arthur continued, reciting the facts with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. "He suffered from mumps orchitis. It resulted in complete azoospermia. He cannot father children. He never could. I diagnosed him myself. I have the records." Evelyn's face turned a color I had never seen on a human being, a mix of gray and purple. She looked at Mark, Arthur said. Arthur turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the shocked faces. "Quote 53, he gestured to me. Quote 54. He turned back to Evelyn, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. Quote 55. Evelyn was shaking. She looked at Mark, her eyes pleading for him to deny it. Quote 56. Mark finally looked up. His face was wet with tears, his expression one of utter defeat. Quote 57, he croaked. Quote 58. Quote 59. Evelyn screamed, her mind snapping. I said. My voice was quiet, but it stopped Evelyn mid-sentence. The shock had burned away, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I stepped away from Mark. I stepped away from the protection of the doctor. I stood alone in the center of the stage. Underscore, quote, underscore, 62, underscore, I said to Evelyn. Quote 63. I turned to Mark. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Quote 64, I said, looking at the man I had vowed to love forever. Quote 65. Quote 66. Mark sobbed. Quote 67. Quote 68, I said. Quote 69. I turned back to the crowd. Quote 70. I walked off the stage. My legs were shaking, but I held my head high. Dr. Henderson was immediately at my side. Quote 71, he said firmly. Quote 72. As we walked down the aisle, the guests parted like the Red Sea. No one said a word. They were too busy processing the absolute immolation of the Harrington family image. I heard Evelyn starting to scream behind us, a guttural, animal sound of rage. Blaming the doctor, blaming Mark, blaming the world. But it sounded distant, like a radio playing in another room. I got into Arthur's car and we drove away. I didn't look back. The fallout was nuclear. I filed for divorce the next day. I moved out of our house and into a small apartment. Mark tried to fight it at first. He showed up at my door, begging, pleading, blaming his trauma, blaming his mother. Quote 73, he said. Quote 74. Quote 75. I told him through the chain lock. Quote 76. Evelyn, true to form, didn't go quietly. She tried to sue for grandparents' rights. She tried to claim that since she had paid for some of the fertility treatments, she hadn't, we paid for everything, she had a claim to the child. She tried to claim I was unfit, but she had made a fatal error. The baby shower had been live-streamed by one of the younger guests. The video of her screaming, "mongrel" and "bastard" went viral in our local community. No judge in the state would let that woman near a child. Dr. Henderson testified in my divorce hearing. He brought the medical records. He brought the donor consent forms signed by Mark. He brought his eyewitness testimony of the abuse at the shower. The judge granted me full custody. Mark got visitation, but he rarely uses it. He's too ashamed. He knows that every time he looks at his son, he's reminded of his own cowardice. My son Leo was born 3 months after the shower. He has big blue eyes and a curious spirit. He is perfect, and he is mine. The most ironic twist of all? The DNA test Evelyn faked. My lawyer used it as evidence of harassment and defamation. We sued her for emotional distress and libel. The settlement was substantial. Evelyn Harrington effectively paid for the college education of the mongrel child she despised. She funded the life of the grandson she will never meet. I hear things about them sometimes. It's a small world, and gossip travels. Evelyn has become a pariah. Her friends, those women who drank her champagne and ate her food, abandoned her. High society doesn't like ugly scenes, and she had created the ugliest one imaginable. She sits alone in that big estate, bitter and isolated, rewriting history in her head where she is the victim. Mark is adrift. He dates, but it never lasts. He drinks too much. He's a man without a purpose, caught between the mother who despises his weakness and the ex-wife who exposed it. As for me, I'm tired, sometimes. Single motherhood is hard. But the air in my house is clean. There are no secrets. There is no walking on eggshells. When I look at Leo, I don't see a quote 80 or a quote 81. I see a person. I see a boy who loves trucks and blueberries and bedtime stories. I kept the card Dr. Henderson sent me when Leo was born. It hangs on my refrigerator. It says simply, quote 82. He was right. That day in the garden was the worst day of my life. It was humiliating, terrifying, and heartbreaking. But it was also the day the rot was cut out. Evelyn thought she was burying me when she opened that envelope. She thought she was throwing dirt on my grave. She didn't realize she was planting a seed. She wanted to reveal that the baby wasn't Mark's, to destroy me. Instead, she revealed that Mark wasn't a father and she wasn't a grandmother, to save me. She set me free. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Leo is asleep, I think about the moment Arthur stepped forward. I think about the look on Evelyn's face when her power evaporated. And I realize something profound about karma. It isn't always cosmic or mystical. Sometimes, karma is just a retired fertility doctor with a low tolerance for bullies and a file folder full of facts. Evelyn wanted a show. She wanted a tragedy. She got one. It just wasn't the tragedy she wrote. It was hers. And me? I got the baby. I got the freedom. And I got the last laugh. Sometimes I wonder if Mark ever thinks about the child he wanted so badly, the child he helped create in his own way. I wonder if he looks at the empty nursery in his mother's house and regrets the silence. But then I remember his face as the crowd whispered, and I know that regret requires a spine, and introspection requires courage. Mark has neither. He is safe in his mother's fortress, protected from the world, protected from life, protected from love. I pick up Leo and smell his hair, baby shampoo and innocence. No hydrangeas, no champagne, just the sweet scent of a fresh start. "You're safe," I whisper to him. "You're safe from them." And that is the only truth that matters.